This video will contain spoilers for JoJo Part 1 and JoJo Part 7 mainly, but I think it's gonna contain spoilers for from Part 1 to Part 7, like all of the parts, so keep that in mind. Dio Brando, one of the most recognizable characters from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's probably most recognizable villain, known for his extravagant demeanor and being quite cartoonishly evil. In fact, cartoonishly evil is putting it lightly when we talk about Dio Brando. And of course there is his giant we've got so many iconic JoJo moments thanks to Dio. Being the infamous "it was me Dio" meme that stopped being funny 3 days after it first appeared. Or what is perhaps now the most well-known manga panel. And from the outside perspective, or from the perspective of those who skipped part 1 and 2, and to those people I only have one thing to ask: how does it feel to be a fucking moron? Dio is just this funny villain, not to be confused with the other funny JoJo villain. But to us, you and me, we know that there is so much more to Dio, that it is the ultimate, through and through, pure and unfiltered evil, with the cruelty of the highest caliber. And how do we know that? Well, Speedwagon said it. And we also saw Dio burn a dog alive, sexually assault women, kill his adoptive father, force a zombified mother to eat her child. You know, it would be easier to list things that Dio has not done. But Your Honor, I'm not here to justify his actions, I'm here to recontextualize them. And this is because Speedwagon, when he meets Dio, he says this:
"This fella reeks of brimstone and blood worse than anyone I've ever laid eyes on! He is pure evil, right down to his very bones! Is he a victim of circumstance, you're wondering? Not on your life! He's been evil since he drew his first breath!"
And you know, this would be all fine and dandy. I would be even willing to accept that, but there are two things that are preventing me from just blindly accepting Speedwagon's assessment. First thing is, while Speedwagon is portrayed like someone who knows how to assess someone's character, because he did that with Jonathan, because he understood that Jonathan did not want to hurt him while he very easily could. There's one problem with this. Speedwagon couldn't tell that Jonathan is purely hearted just from observation. He needed a direct confrontation, because he was going to assault Jonathan with his goons. He changed his heart after Jonathan kicked him. And the fight went on for a couple of minutes, so you know, plenty of time for Speedwagon to declare if Jonathan is good or evil. When he meets Dio, he does not have a direct physical confrontation with him. He simply sees him and just says that he's purely evil from birth, that he's not a victim of circumstances or anything. Speedwagon claims to be able to sniff out evil within people. Again, did he not smell Jonathan's pure smell when he first met him before trying to fight him? As a matter of fact, he only realizes after losing the battle that Jonathan not only spared him, but also his comrades. And obviously after accusing Dio of being pure evil from birth, Dio does not argue with this, because why would he? Throughout his entire life he was led to believe that he in fact is just scum. And he was led to this belief by none other than his own father. And here we are getting to the most important part of this quote-unquote defense of Dio, which is the abuse of his father. And the idea that could Dio turn out different if he grew up in a different environment. And the thing is, there is evidence that he could, and this evidence lies in the very existence of Dio Brando. Now, Dio Brando is of course the Steel Ball universe version of Dio. The story of Steel Ball Run is different than the story of part 1. It takes place in a different place, but what is undeniable is that Steel Ball Run has counterparts of some characters from the previous parts. That is basically how this universe of JoJo would operate from that point, having characters that represent characters from the original universe, some more obvious than others. Diego is probably the best example of this. What I found fascinating about Diego right from the get-go, or rather from the point where his backstory was revealed, because in Part 7 universe, Diego grew up with his mother instead of his father. Now if Speedwagon is right, then Diego should not be really all that much different from the original Dio, as if Dio really is born evil, then he should still be evil in this incarnation, but he's not. Yes, there is the argument that those two are technically not the same character, but I think it's quite obvious that Diego is supposed to be the reimagining of Dio's story. And so what is the main difference between Dio's father's parenting and Diego's mother's parenting? Well, the first obvious one is that Diego's mother actually loved him, and that she, despite being poor, had pride and even sense of honor. And none of these things can really be said about Dio Brando from Part 1. In fact, quite the opposite can be said about him. He was an opportunistic thief with no pride nor honor. And I think their respective worldviews were instilled within their children. Dio being incredibly opportunistic, fighting with no honor, and even being prone to alcoholism. While Diego not being exactly honorable, as he's still rather opportunistic, he had a strong sense of pride. And the moves he made to reach his goal are, while definitely morally gray, they're not nearly as bad as what Dio did. Moreover, it's kind of hard to even condemn Diego as wanting to avenge his mother's death after the rich society abandoned them is rather understandable. Diego despises those around him because he sees in them the people who caused his mother's death, which is why he's set his goal to climb up to the top of society, which causes him to be very ambitious, which in turn causes him to do some things that are morally questionable. Like, for example, marrying an 80-year-old woman for her wealth. And it is said that she died 6 months after marrying Diego, which the story does sort of imply he killed her, but is never really brought up again or explored any further. So there's no reasonable evidence to suggest that Diego did kill her beyond him being very ambitious. Your Honor, have you considered that my client might simply be into gilfs? Actually, in this case, I'm thinking Dio is probably my client, Diego is not. If I'm doing the whole Saul Goodman bit, Diego would be like a witness or something. In fact, prior to his mother's death, Diego was shown to be very resourceful and good-natured. I mean, just look at him. And the most important detail I would bring up in this comparison, Diego is never shown to be overly cruel. He never goes out of his way to be cruel to others. Yes, he bullies Johnny and Gyro, and is generally unpleasant to be around, but that could very easily be due to the fact that he's British. Diego is very pragmatic. He only does things to reach his goal. And if someone presents an obstacle in his way, he tries to deal with them in the most efficient way possible. Before trying to kill them, he even warns Johnny and Gyro to stay away. And it is in fact Gyro who challenges Diego. It's only really after that Diego becomes especially vengeful towards them. But even this vengeance does not blind him from his ultimate goal. And so instead pursuing those two right away, he approaches Funny Valentine with a proposal. So while Diego enjoys winning, he does not necessarily enjoy cruelty. Let's compare it to Dio, who, for example, burned Jonathan's dog, which avails him like nothing to reach his goal of becoming rich, something that his father instilled within him. In fact, if anything, if he got caught doing this, that could cause serious trouble for him. It was a risk for like nothing. I think the most infamous display of Dio's unnecessary cruelty and power over his enemies was when he, for absolutely no reason, carried Polnareff down the stairs in stop time just to make fun of him. Of course, these acts of cruelty and the need to display one's power over another can be traced back to Dio's childhood, where his father did the same, and not just his father, even the other people around him. With Dio, it's cranked up to 11, considering that he had absolutely no positive source of love in his early childhood. And you could make the argument that the Joestar family treated Dio as their own. He did get the opportunity and the love to change his ways, but he never really confronted himself in regards to the abuse by his father, nor did the Joestar family really know what went on in Dio's early life. We can even make this comparison with another set of characters. If we needed another example of how environment can shape a person in this universe, in the JoJo franchise, we need to look no further than at Jonathan Joestar and Johnny Joestar. Similarly to how Diego is a counterpart of Dio, Johnny is the counterpart of Jonathan. Again, both are two different characters, but it is quite obvious that Johnny is supposed to be the reimagination of Jonathan. I mean, even in early part 7, Johnny's full name is revealed to be Jonathan. And while Jonathan is the embodiment of everything pure, Johnny is a lot darker. And if we compare the upbringing of Jonathan and Johnny, like we did with Dio and Diego, we'd find that Johnny, similarly to the original Dio, was not really loved by his father, who quite obviously favored Johnny's brother Nicholas over him, to the point where after Nicholas tragically died, their father would say that God took the wrong son. And this, combined with the fact that Johnny actually blamed himself for Nicholas's death, as you would imagine, would leave some marks on Johnny. After becoming a rather accomplished jockey, Johnny lived a very indulgent life and also became very arrogant and egoistical, which would later lead to him being shot and crippled. He had to abandon his career as a jockey, and in turn everyone has abandoned him as well. So understandably, when Johnny sees an opportunity to walk again, possibly reclaim his previous life, he tries to take that opportunity and reach his goals by any means necessary, just like Diego. As a matter of fact, he says that he even wishes to kill Diego, and it's Gyro who tells him that he might want to calm down, implying that without the Gyro's influence, Johnny would indeed go down a darker path. When we compare this to Jonathan, whose dad, George Joestar, was basically as close to a perfect dad as you can imagine, raising his son to be a gentleman very successfully. Jonathan had everything he needed in his life, both materially and emotionally, even with the lack of maternal figure in his life. And you might make the argument that the original George Joestar treated Dio better than he did Jonathan. That is quite simply not true. He treated Jonathan and Dio equally, both like his own sons. And he only really praised Dio over Jonathan when it came to Dio having better manners than Jonathan. It's nowhere near Johnny's dad saying that God took the wrong son when Nicholas died. Anyway, in conclusion today, I think what I tried to imply by this is that it was unfair for Speedwagon to assess Dio as being born evil instead of his environment having a play in how Dio turned out at the end. While it does not by any means justify anything that Dio did, the environment in which Dio grew up in is a mitigating circumstance in everything, in my opinion. Because what Speedwagon did, in a way, is rather harmful, because Dio was a victim of abuse, and maybe with a couple of sessions of therapy, with a lot of sessions of therapy, maybe more than one can, go through in his lifetime, Dio could change his ways and gain a new outlook on the world. Maybe. And Dio is essentially immortal, so it's not like there is not enough time for him to repent and fix his mistakes. If we take all this into consideration, then maybe in the court of law, Dio would not get get 7 consecutive life sentences, but only maybe like 5. Anyway, if you made it towards the end of the video, I would appreciate if you could like and subscribe and leave a nice comment, because I assure you that's what a true gentleman like Jonathan would do. But if you'd rather be an evil asshole like Dio, then feel free not to like and subscribe, you know, I don't care. It's your life at the end, but remember, our choices shape who we are. And hopefully I will see you next time.